Welcome to the Fortified Life podcast, where we learn how to develop a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. From the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. Here's our host, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, stewardship coach, and my husband, the man they call Mr. Fortified, Jason Davis.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fortified Life podcast. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. We are passionate about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace, and it's no different this week. We have the opportunity to bring on coaches, authors, speakers, CEOs who are also passionate about putting God back in business. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited about our guest today. I've been very familiar with her content and message over the years, and I pinched myself when I actually had an opportunity to bring her on the show. Before we get into it, let me introduce her to you. Kristina Ellis is an entrepreneur, #1 best-selling author, mom, and motivational speaker. After winning $500,000 in scholarships and earning both her bachelor's and master's degrees from her dream schools, she was inspired to guide other students toward their own debt-free education. She's the creator of College Ninja, where they help students go to college debt-free. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life, Kristina Ellis. Kristina, how's it going?
Great. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Kristina, we know from your bio you're a superstar. And we know that for many, they see the highlights, and we know that it took some blood, sweat, and tears to get to where you are today. So kind of take us back on the journey throughout the years to where you are today.
Oh man, where do I start? It's been quite a journey, and I'm just so excited to be here because my story is truly a God story. Like, it's easy to look at the highlight reel and think, wow, that's cool. But when you know the depth of the story, it's like, it's all God. Like, it's truly been his calling and his grace on my life. So I grew up in a low income household. My mom is an immigrant from Venezuela. My dad is a country boy from Southern Indiana. And they ended up meeting, falling in love, had this beautiful life, all these this vision, these dreams that they had planned. And unfortunately, when my dad was in his 30s, he got diagnosed with cancer. I was 3. And it just rocked our world. And we went through several years of cancer treatments, and it was brain cancer. So it was a pretty dramatic journey for anybody who has had a spouse or a family member deal with that. It is a rough experience. We eventually lost him when I was 7 years old. And so it rocked our family's world. My mom, she's new to this country. She's trying to figure out how to support a family, how to make it so that her kids could have a great future here. And she basically sat me down freshman year of high school. This lady, she can stretch a dollar further than anybody I know, but she's looking at college costs. She's looking off in the horizon, and she's just like, that's not realistic. There's no way that I can send both my kids to college. And so she sat me down for a conversation and was like, Kristina, I love you and I believe in you, but there's just no way that I can support you financially once you graduate from high school. So you got to figure out your own way to pay for college. And of course, I'm shocked. I'm like, I'm a freshman in high school. Why are we having this conversation? I don't know what you're doing right now. But throughout that conversation, she started planting seeds. She was like, if you start working hard enough now, you can earn these things called scholarships and go to school debt free. Now, of course, she's like the stereotypical immigrant parent where she's like, I worked so hard to get here to this country. So now you need to work 17 times harder and make my efforts worth it. Like, not going to college was never an option in her book. She was like, you will go to college. You're going to fight and do great things with your life. So at that point, she did light a fire in me. I started learning about scholarships. And at the time, thank God, I didn't even know about student loans. I assumed that if you didn't get scholarships or have cash to pay for college, there was just no other way. And so I was like, I have to earn a certain amount of scholarships to go to college. And so I just started hustling, and I got involved in a ton of extracurricular activities. I read all these books and articles just trying to figure out, what does it take to stand out in the scholarship application process? And thankfully, senior year of high school, treated the application process like a part-time job. I applied like crazy. and ended up winning over $500,000 in scholarships and was able to go to Vanderbilt for undergrad and Belmont for grad school completely debt free, which was such a blessing. So amazing. And it completely ended up kind of starting this trajectory to change our family tree.
Mm, my
Fast
goodness,
forward.
Christine.
Yeah. Yeah. Wild journey. Wild journey. So
Wow.
that's the backstory that kind of led to this point where I get to Vanderbilt and I, am trying to fit in. A lot of people at Vanderbilt are paying full price. If anybody's familiar with the tuition rates at Vanderbilt, it's kind of crazy. And so I never imagined that I would be doing what I was doing today. Like this was not something I wanted to do. I actually didn't love sharing my story. I didn't want to share my testimony. And God has just been through this process of drawing it out, and it has led to all of these experiences, which is just, it's crazy.
Mm. Kristina, actually, yes, we'll get into the scholarships in a second because I remember even when I was in high school, I took a visit to Vanderbilt. So when you said that, it brought back memories. But I was like, yeah, Vanderbilt is a really good school. So
Ooh, well, now I think this year they came out and said that they're $95,000 a year, which is crazy.
per year, folks, per
Per year.
year.
Would not have
My
been
God.
realistic for us without scholarships.
My goodness. So Christina, just having being the child of an immigrant and the pressures that sometimes people can feel coming with that. You said it lit a fire underneath you, and then you said because I don't want the listeners to miss this, especially for the parents. Like it was like a part-time job, you applying for scholarships. And with what you just said about schools like a Vanderbilt, um, where do you think the misconception is about school right now? We know there's been a lot, there's the student loan crisis going on, but you really just from a work ethic perspective as a child were like, no, I've got to go do this. What message would you give to um, the parents and the students out there for, hey, this is possible, but we're going to have to dig into some things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel hopeless. They see all the bad news
Mm,
about student loans and they think that, I just have to take on student loan debt. There's not really another way. Scholarships aren't realistic. There's no way to go to school debt free. And man, I feel like I can say this because this is a faith-based podcast.
hmm
I think that that is one of the greatest traps the enemy has laid out is he's
mm,
getting 18-year-olds in massive amounts of student loan debt before they even start their adult lives. And then they're contending with that, for years after graduation. A lot of them are graduating with, 40, 50, $100,000 in student loan debt. And then they're just trying to fight for that, fight out of that for years to come. So I think that people have to believe in themselves, believe in the potential to go to school debt free. Personally, I won scholarships, but it's so important to know that there are so many different strategies to going to college without debt. That's why I started my company, College Ninja. We are all about giving people tools and strategies to go to school debt free. There's scholarships. There are colleges that are completely tuition free. There are jobs, tuition assistance programs that will completely pay for your education while you're getting paid through a job. So I just want people to be encouraged. Don't buy into the narrative that you have to take on debt to go to school because that's just not
mm,
true. There are so many different strategies out there, but first you got to make a commitment. You got to fight the toxic narrative that everybody needs debt to go to college and believe that you can find a path to go to school without debt.
mm. Christina, you already so motivating. I'm ready to go out. I'm not even in school and I want to go apply just for what you're saying. Christina, you have a powerful story in that you won 500,000. Like, I think when people read that, they go, they need to do a double take. I think I could understand if someone won $5,000 in scholarships or $50,000 in scholarships, but 500K. Just help us wrap our heads around that. Like, how did that even become a thing? And was there a moment for you personally where you're like, how much money did I get in scholarships again? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I think at that point I was so determined to go to school debt free, and there's no guarantee that you're going to win scholarships. I was just applying like crazy and throwing as many applications out there as possible, hoping that something would stick. So when I
Mm.
did get the total back of $500,000, I, was just pleasantly surprised, but didn't expect it. I was just hoping for something. And here's something, you were talking about my bio earlier, and I mentioned how much this is a God story.
Mm-hmm.
When I started this journey and wrote a book and created a business, I didn't set out to have this vision on my own. I was
Mm.
sitting with a mentor one day having coffee and telling him my story about winning scholarships. And he was just asking about my backstory. At this point, it's like I wasn't super excited about sharing my testimony. I have all this stuff that happened when I was a child, low income background, losing my father, and didn't really share that story. And he's starting to pull it out of me. He's starting to ask me these hard questions. And I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in passing, yeah, I won $500,000, something like that in scholarships. And he's like, Kristina, that's a fascinating story. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, you should share that with other people. Like, I feel like God is calling you to at least give back to somebody. And I'm from Nashville.
Mm.
Everybody's creative. Everybody's writing songs. They're doing something. So he's like, would you like to write a book about it? And I was like, yeah, everybody's doing books. And he's like, Kristina, you've got to do this, because there's another little Kristina out there who doesn't believe in herself, who thinks that student loans are the only way and you can change their life. And so we really prayed about it, my husband and I, and we're like, should we write this book? And when I wrote the book, I honestly thought one person would read it. I was like, if, I had no platform, I, didn't have any sort of credibility in this space. And I really felt the Lord was like, you need to help my kids. You need to help my kids avoid debt. I have callings on their lives that student loans are going to stop. So I
Mm-hmm.
need you to write a book to help them, avoid this trap that the enemy has laid out. And so I just kept telling myself as I wrote that book, if two people read this book, if one person reads this book, I will have done my purpose and I will have fulfilled my mission and fulfilled my calling. And so I wrote this book, and it was this very technical book. It was just how to win scholarships. It was like, boom, boom, boom. This is how you do it. Here's the technicalities. Here's how to stand out in the process. And we were going to self-publish it on Amazon. And the mentor ended up taking it to somebody that he knew in the business world who was a publisher. And he's like, we're just going to get some feedback from them, and then we'll self-publish it together on Amazon. And I left that meeting and they were like, all right, we'll get the paperwork to you next week. And I was like, what paperwork?
Wow.
They're like, we're offering you a publishing deal. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. I never expected that. But then they were like, here's the caveat. In order for that to happen, we need you to double the length of the book, and it needs to be your testimony. It needs to
Mm.
be like the depth of who you are and what you've been through. And I was like, that is the one thing I never wanted to do. Like, I literally saw somebody on stage at church one day, like crying and sharing their testimony. And I leaned over to my husband and I was like, or I think it was on the way home, I was like, I'm so glad that there's people who want to share their testimony. That'll never be me. Like, I never want to like publicly talk about the stuff I went through. And I was like, God has such a sense of humor, because he's like, yep, you, like, you're
Yeah.
going to get out there, you're going to share your testimony. So in this book, I end up talking about everything. It is like a journal of my childhood, all the crazy things I've been through, secrets I hadn't told people, for my entire, like my high school boyfriend and my husband now were the only people who knew stuff that was in that book. So we ended up titling
Wow.
Confessions of a Scholarship Winner, because for
Wow.
me, it was truly confessions. Like, I was having to tell family members of things that were going to be in that book that I had never shared. I had dealt with like self-destruction, suicidal thoughts, and all these different like things that I had been through. And it was crazy because it's a scholarship book. Like, why would anybody put that in a scholarship book? But I felt like the
Mhm.
Lord was saying, like, there are kids out there who don't believe in themselves. Like, they are thinking that their story, their backstory is so bad. Their lack, their situation is so desperate that there's no way that they can change their future. And so I need you to be honest and confess and share with them like what you've been through, so that they can believe in themselves. And so it was just so wild, because it's like, I can't take credit for it. I can't take credit for,
Mhm.
even putting it out there, because I really feel like it was the Lord nudging me along. And then we went to put the book on the market. And, again, no platform, no anything, thinking two people are going to read this book. And it's a month before the book comes out. And we get a call. The publisher had said, hopefully we can get some local media to get your feet wet. Like, I've never been on TV at that point, never done anything like
Mhm.
that. They're like, you can get a little bit of practice if we can get a local station, and maybe someday you could be like on a national interview. And I was like, awesome. And so a month beforehand, we get a call on a Monday saying Fox and Friends wants you to come to New York on Friday, like this Friday, to be on a live
Very
interview.
cool.
And I felt like this sense of panic. I was like, oh my gosh, I have all these secrets I've never told anybody. And now I'm going to have to share it on national media. Like in that moment, I was like, God, what are you doing? Just
What's happening?
terrified. And thankfully, like went up there, did it. And that interview launched the book into the top 40. And it's been able to help so many parents and students go to college debt free. But again, like I did nothing to earn that. I did nothing to deserve it. It wasn't my idea. If anything, I was like resistant to it. But God was like, I have kids I need to speak to, and I need you to just follow along and do what I say and accomplish this purpose.
My God. Christina, where can people get a copy of that book? Because I mean, just everything you're saying right now, people need to read that yesterday.
Yeah. Well, you can go to our website, collegeninja.com. It has all of our content for going to school debt free.
Mm, my goodness, folks, and I'm telling you, I've heard Christina speak just previously, just being a fan of her content, but I would strongly encourage you, and we'll have all of Christina's information in the book and the show notes too, fortifiedlifepodcast.com. So don't you worry, as we continue the talking to her, you will have an opportunity to go get a copy of that book. Wow, Christina, so this really sets the table. You're pouring out, you're stepping out of your comfort zone, you're doing all of these things, and then as life happens and professions change, and now you have College Ninja. I love the name, by the way. What went into founding College Ninja? And we'll get into, which I'm sure people are wondering, like, what else is possible when it comes to paying for school? So many people have student loans, and people know that there's scholarships, but there's grants and all these other things, but a lot of people just don't know what all is out there. So talk to us about how College Ninja started and the work that you do with students to help them go to school debt free.
Yeah. Well, College Ninja is a vision I've had for years. I've wanted
Mm,
to really be able to go deeper with parents and students, do some group coaching and sessions where, they could really in depth go through what it truly takes to go to school without debt and, get to see them face to face and really encourage them along the way. Because I think that it's just so pervasive right now. I mean, we all saw the student loan crisis play out in the news over the last year, and you
mm.
even see, or the last few years, and you even hear like guidance counselors saying debt is good, take out debt to go to college.
Yeah,
And everybody does. And so it
crazy.
feels like we are just fighting something that is so entrenched in our society. And it's so just well known. People think it's normal. And so that was a huge heart and passion. I feel like the Lord is still saying, like, I need my kids to avoid that. I feel like one of my big passions is seeing people walk in their God-given purpose. Like I want
Mhm.
them to be able to do the mission and calling on their life. And it's like I've taken a call from a pastor who was $160,000 in student loan debt.
Oh
And
my
his
gosh.
heart and his passion is to preach the good news and to set captives free. Like he's got all of this gifting to be able to communicate God's message, but he's got this noose around his neck. He's got
Yeah,
$160,000 in student loan debt. He feels like he can't breathe and he's
yeah.
stuck and he feels like he can't do what God is calling him to do because of student loans. And it was for a ministry degree, a
Mm.
ministry degree. And
Wow.
so that just lights me on fire. It makes me mad. It makes me passionate. And it makes me go, we've got to do something. And so this pastor, he ended up having to take on a second job because of the student loan debt. And so
Mm,
it's how can we help students be set up and not in chains, right? The borrower is slave to the lender. Like the
mhm.
enemy is putting kids in chains from the very beginning. So we College Ninja, that's the heart and passion is to, get out ahead of, this tempting system that encourages debt and say, hey, there's another way. You do not have to do that. Like go
Yeah.
this way and you can avoid that pain. You can avoid that heartache and give them the tactical tools and strategies to actually accomplish that mission.
Mm. I love it, folks. Christina, I think sometimes people they hear different words and they make the assumption that some things are the same or similar. But just high level, what is the difference between a scholarship and a grant when it comes to financial aid for college?
Yeah, typically grants are government based. A lot of times
Okay.
they're based on the information that you provide in the FAFSA, which is the
Hmm.
pre-application for federal student aid. And so they're often need based, whereas scholarships are available for so many different reasons. Of course, there are need based scholarships, but there's also merit based scholarships that are based on your qualifications, your extracurricular activities. There's even really random scholarships, like scholarships for having the best zombie apocalypse escape plan or the best peanut butter sandwich recipe. So it's pretty cool because there's scholarships for almost anything you can think of.
Love it, love it. I just thanks for the clarification, Christina, because I think sometimes in this internet, social media driven world, people throw a lot of terms around, and it's like, no, there's actually differences and nuances to paying for school. It's just understanding the qualifications and what it takes. Like you said, there are a lot of different scholarships out there for a lot of different reasons. So thanks for that breakdown. Christina, another thing you made me think about is the path to college. So we know that there's public universities, there's private, there's 2-year schools. Just talk about where trend wise and what you're seeing in 2024 is has the conversation widened now because it used to be just only kind of that 4-year degree. You've got to go to the big school. How have you seen the conversation change around how there are different paths to get to school?
Well, we're in a really exciting season because I think everything
Hmm.
is changing, right? And it's a
Mm,
great thing. There's still a place for 4-year schools, and
hmm.
I'm all about getting the best education that you can afford. And
Yeah.
so I'm not going to be somebody that says everybody should go to community college, everybody should go to a 4-year school because it's so nuanced. It really depends on what you want to do with your life. What are your goals? What are your passions? And where do you think God's leading you? And then also, what can you afford? What's realistic? And so, and what creative strategies are you willing to implement? Because you may not be able to afford a 4-year school now, but there's
Yeah.
probably several strategies you can implement if you're willing to work and put the strategy into it. And so I think that it's been shifting and it's going to continue to shift. And it's really important now more than ever to ask those questions. Do I really need a degree? For a lot of
Hmm.
people, it will be yes, still engineers, doctors. There's all sorts of paths that still do need a degree, or you may want a degree, even if it's not
Yeah.
necessarily technically what you need for your career field. But it's important to ask those questions because there's great boot camp certificate programs that may accomplish the same goal in a shorter amount of time. And
Hmm.
it's just awesome right now that we have these opportunities to be so strategic and find different paths. I think right now we're really heading towards a workforce that is skill based, which is awesome.
Mm.
And so it's like, can you do the job that we're hiring you to do versus do you have a fancy degree from a fancy school? I think that
Yeah.
that's a change that's been needed for a long time. And so, again, being super strategic and asking those hard questions, what is the right path for me is so important. In our program, Stacking College Dollars, which basically has 7 core areas that you need to look at to go to school debt free, an entire module is based on college choice because it's like you
Mm.
really got to be strategic about what school you pick. Like that's the foundation of it. And there's so many options available. So having those tools and that framework to go, what is the right school for me? It's not just going to be my parents' alma mater or the place that all of the kids from my school are going. It needs to be
Hmm.
what is the right path for you as an individual.
Mm. So good. Christina, another question for you. In thinking about all the different trends we're seeing at school and student loan crisis, your mom gave you, and you said your words, a wake-up call when you were in high school. How early should the conversation be occurring between parents and kids about going to school if it's the right choice for them? I think for you, it was the ninth grade. I know as a ninth grader, you're like, oh, why are we talking about this? So how do you, what's the, what's the conversation like when you're sitting down with parents and students? Like, this, if we don't start thinking about this, it'll happen on its own, and then our flexibility and our choices get limited. So, what's the conversation like for how early parents and students should be having these conversations about where and how they're going to school?
Yeah, I think as early as possible. I love talking to middle school parents, especially
Mm,
parents of freshmen or sophomores in high school. I think a lot of people have this thought of like, oh, my student's only in ninth grade. I don't need to talk about this yet. We'll wait till
yeah,
junior, senior year. And that's okay. If you have a junior or senior, there's still so many strategies we can implement. But the earlier you
yeah,
have this conversation, the more time they have to build their resume without stress. Like if they want to go for some of the more competitive scholarships, a lot of them are going to look at your extracurricular activities, things that
yeah.
you've done. If you wait till junior or senior year, a lot of times you're kind of scrambling, going, ah, what can I do? But it's like if we're starting to have this conversation in middle school, early high school, it's like you can really take time to figure out your passions and to build a resume that feels really organic and authentic to you versus feeling that stress and that panic. You can start applying for scholarships early. So you're spreading out the effort and, starting to win some of those awards earlier on. And you can work on your transcript, building up your grades. There's just so many more strategies we can implement in a way that's stress free if we start early versus trying to figure it out in a rush second semester senior year. But again, if you have a second semester senior, it is okay. You can still find a strategy. That is not a pass to go, oh man, I guess we just have to take student loans out. No, there's still strategies you can use, but it's just a bit easier if we can start sooner.
I love it, folks. It's never too late. Obviously, the early bird gets the worm. We've all heard that, but it's never too late, ladies and gentlemen. So definitely lean into what Kristina is saying. Kristina, you've gotten us excited. You've told us elements of your story. You've added value. Kristina, what are you excited about in the upcoming future for College Ninja? I know you're working on a lot of different things, but where do you see this going into, especially into 2025?
Yeah. Well, another huge passion of mine is personal finance. I used to work with
Hmm.
Dave on the Ramsey show and have worked with a lot of families on, their finances. And I have a lot of students now. I've been doing this for over 10 years. So now they're young adults and they're trying to figure out, how to invest and how to build their family finances for the future. So just kind of taking this message into the future and into their lives and providing value and content so that they can not just go to school debt free, but again, it all goes back to I want people to be able to accomplish their God given purpose and to be
Hmm.
able to freely serve the Lord and get out there and do what they're called to do. So, finances, I don't want them to be a hindrance. I don't want them to
Yeah.
stop somebody from doing what God's calling them to do. So, really building that life cycle out of, we're going to school debt free, we're going to avoid student loans. And then what? How can we build your finances to the point where you can maximize your life, where you can accomplish what God's calling you to do with freedom and without stress? If you want to be a stay-at-home mom someday, if you want to be a missionary, if you want to be a pastor, how can we make sure that your finances are set up to where they're not the thing that's going to stop you? They're not going to be the stress that is weighing you down. There's enough other things that the enemy will try to throw at you when you're trying to do God's work. Let's make sure finances, that's not a tool that he can use against you.
Mm, so good, folks. She's preaching good today, and I don't know if that's a future title somewhere, Christina. Maximize your life. There's something good there. I'm just saying.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, folks, Christina, we've got to let her go. She's doing what God is calling her to do, and she is a busy lady. Christina, before you go, where can listeners connect with you and your content and everything that you're doing with College Ninja?
Yes, you can go to collegeninja.com. We always have freebies on our website. So if you want to sign up right now, we have a free scholarship toolkit. So if you want to come and get some information, visit collegeninja.com. I have my website, KristinaEllis.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at I am Kristina Ellis, Kristina. We've got some really exciting adventures personally that I will be sharing about on Instagram. So if you want to see what our family is up to and some of the ways we feel God is calling us, then check out my Instagram. I would love to connect there.
Very, very cool. Folks, you've heard it directly from the source. You know how to find Christina. Christina, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out to hang out with us here on the show. You have really opened up, I'm sure, a lot of eyes. And I know there's a lot of different messaging going on in the space dealing with scholarships and student loans and personal finance. But thank you for everything that you do to further this work, and it's necessary work. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for here on the Fortified Life podcast this week. You know how we leave things. Don't compartmentalize your faith in the marketplace. And from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fortified Life podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out fortifiedlifepodcast.com for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortify, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business, available on Amazon.